My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 29 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your future dies is that it almost never sounds dramatic when it begins. There's no music, no shattered glass, no perfect sentence hanging in the air like a warning you're smart enough to catch. Sometimes, it starts with something as small as a phone ringing on a quiet Saturday afternoon. If you had asked me 4 years ago what my family was like, I would have told you we were normal. Close, even. The kind of family that posted smiling photos on holidays, that had traditions, that believed, at least on the surface, in showing up for each other. But if you had stayed long enough, if you had watched carefully, you would have noticed something else. There was a center of gravity in our house, and it wasn't me. Her name is Ariana Carter, my older sister. 3 years older, which meant that for most of my childhood, she was less a sibling and more a standard I was measured against. Ariana was everything people admire without questioning why. Beautiful in that effortless way that made strangers soften when they spoke to her. Confident, magnetic, the kind of person who didn't need to ask for attention because it just arrived. She played varsity softball, got a scholarship, knew how to smile at the right moments, say the right things, make people feel like they mattered. And my parents, they built their entire world around her. Our mother, Diane, kept Ariana's trophies polished like they were heirlooms. Our father, Frank, told stories about her like they were proof of something bigger, proof that they had done something right, that they had raised someone exceptional. When people came over, the conversation always circled back to Ariana, what Ariana was doing, where Ariana was going, how proud they were. I was there too. Technically, the other daughter, the quiet one. The one who got good grades but never quite earned the spotlight. I learned early how to exist in the background without making it obvious that I noticed. It wasn't neglect in the way people like to define it. There were no missed meals, no obvious cruelty, just imbalance. The kind that doesn't bruise you immediately. The kind that settles into your bones slowly, until one day you realize you've been shrinking your whole life. Ariana stayed local after college, worked part-time, figured things out, floated in that way people forgive when you're charming enough. About 2 years before everything fell apart, she started volunteering with a youth sports league. Softball, of course. Girls between 8 and 12. My parents loved it. Ariana's giving back, my mom would say, like it was a headline. She's such a role model. And Ariana leaned into that image. Photos after games. Big smiles. Arms around kids who looked up at her like she was something safe. Something good. I believed it too. That's the part that still unsettles me. Not that she fooled strangers. That she fooled me. The call came on a Saturday in September. I remember that because the light in my apartment was soft in that early fall way, and I had laundry half folded on the couch. Normal. Everything about that moment was normal. Until it wasn't. His name was Ethan, Ariana's boyfriend. They had been together for a little over a year. He wasn't like her. Quieter. A little awkward. The kind of man who seemed constantly aware that he had somehow ended up with someone brighter than he was. I liked him, not because we were close, but because he felt real. When I answered the phone, he was crying. Not the controlled kind. Not the kind people let themselves do in front of others. This was messy. Broken. Like something inside him had come apart too fast to contain. Olivia, he said, and I barely recognized his voice. I didn't know who else to call. That was the first thing he said. Not hello. Not are you busy. Just, I didn't know who else to call. He told me he had found something on Ariana's phone. And even now, I'm not going to describe what he saw. Some things don't belong in stories. They belong in courtrooms, in evidence files, in places where they can serve a purpose other than shock. What matters is this. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't something that could be explained away. It was deliberate, repeated, and it involved children. I remember standing in the middle of my living room, one sock still in my hand, listening to him speak in fragments. Words that didn't fit together, couldn't fit together. Because if they did, then everything I thought I knew about my sister would have to be rewritten in real time. The dates, he kept saying. Olivia, there are dates. This isn't one time. My brain tried to reject it. It reached for every possible alternative. A mistake. A misunderstanding. Something taken out of context. But his voice, there's a certain kind of fear you can't fake, and he had it. I can't go to your parents, he said at one point, almost whispering. They'll make it about her. Even he knew. Even someone who had only been in our family for a year understood the rule I had spent my whole life learning. Protect Ariana. At all costs. When he finished, there was a long silence. The kind where the world doesn't move, but something inside you does. Violently. Irreversibly. I wish I could tell you, I cried. Or screamed. or said something that made sense of that moment. I didn't. I just stood there and felt something in my mind shift, like a door closing, softly, but permanently. The door that said, "That's your sister. You love her. You protect her." I don't know exactly when it locked, only that by the time I spoke again, it was already sealed. "Don't do anything," I told him. My voice didn't sound like mine. "Don't confront her. Don't delete anything. Don't tell anyone else." "Olivia, I need 24 hours." He agreed. I hung up. And for the next 3 hours, I sat on my couch, staring at a wall that suddenly felt unfamiliar, like I had stepped into someone else's life without realizing it. I ran through every option. Confront Ariana. Go to my parents. Pretend I never got the call. Handle it quietly. Fix it. Contain it. That last one, that's what my family would have chosen. Not because they're evil, but because they believe in appearances more than truth. Because in our house, problems weren't solved. They were managed. I played out that version in my head, over and over, and every time it ended the same way. Ariana denying everything, my parents believing her, evidence disappearing, children growing up with something they couldn't name, and no one ever answering for it. That version required one thing from me: silence. I sat there in that quiet apartment with the weight of a choice that didn't feel like a choice at all. And somewhere between hour 3 and hour 4, I understood something I wish I had never had to learn. If I stayed quiet, I wouldn't just be protecting my sister. I would be becoming part of what she had done. And I couldn't live with that. So I chose the other version, the one that would cost me everything. I just didn't know how much yet. The next evening, Wednesday, I got in my car and I drove to a police station. The police station was quieter than I expected. That's the first thing I remember. Not chaos, not urgency, not the kind of place where lives come apart in loud, dramatic ways. Just fluorescent lights. A receptionist who looked up briefly when I walked in, and the sound of my own heartbeat, too loud in a room that didn't feel like it belonged to me. I almost turned around. That part matters. Because people like to believe that doing the right thing feels strong, clear, certain. It doesn't. It feels like standing on the edge of something you can't undo, and knowing that once you step forward, there is no version of your life where you get to go back. "My name is Olivia Carter," I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. "I need to report something." That was how it started. Not with anger, not with certainty, just a sentence. And everything that followed unfolded from there. They sat me down in a small room. A table, 2 chairs, a box of tissues I didn't touch. Her name was Detective Ramirez. Mid-40s maybe, calm in a way that didn't feel detached. Just steady, like she had seen the worst parts of people and learned how not to flinch. She asked me to start from the beginning, so I did. I told her about Ethan's call, about what he had found, about Ariana's work with the Youth League, about the photos, the practices, the access. Every word felt like I was placing something fragile and dangerous onto the table between us, something that, once spoken, couldn't be taken back. At one point, my hands started shaking. Not dramatically, just enough that I had to press them flat against the table to keep them still. Ramirez didn't interrupt. She didn't rush me. She just listened, and occasionally wrote things down. When I finished, there was a pause. A long one, the kind that stretches just enough to make you wonder if you've said too much, or not enough. Then she looked at me and said something I didn't expect. This took a lot of courage. I shook my head. It shouldn't. Because it shouldn't. It shouldn't take courage to report someone who is hurting children. It should be automatic, obvious, the only option. But when that someone is your sister, when your parents have built their entire world around her, when your family has spent decades teaching you, quietly, consistently, that she is untouchable, it's not automatic. It's the hardest thing you will ever do. And the loneliest. I gave her everything I had. Ethan's number, Ariana's address, her schedule, the name of the league, names of other coaches, anything that might matter. When I walked out of that station, it was dark. I don't remember the drive home, not clearly. Just fragments, street lights, red lights I don't remember stopping at, the feeling that something had already begun moving forward without me. It took less than 48 hours. That's what Ramirez told me later. Cases with digital evidence move fast once they start. They got Ariana's phone, her laptop. They got messages, files, things I will never repeat, things that don't belong to me to tell. What I can tell you is this. Within 2 weeks, Ariana was arrested. Tuesday morning, 6 a.m., at her apartment. I didn't see it happen, but I imagined it anyway. The knock on the door, the confusion, The moment where reality catches up to you, whether you're ready or not. At first, there were 4 identified victims. By the time the investigation widened, there were 8. 8 children. 8 lives that had been altered in ways that don't simply fade with time. And all of it, every moment, had happened in a community that trusted her. Because she smiled. Because she was charming. Because my parents told everyone she was a good person. My parents found out before I could tell them. Of course they did. Ariana called them from the police station before she called a lawyer. That detail has stayed with me, not because it's surprising, but because it explains everything. Their first call after that wasn't to me. It wasn't to ask what happened, or whether it was true, or whether anyone had been hurt. Their first call was to a defense attorney. By the time my phone rang 6 hours later, they had already chosen a version of the story, and I wasn't in it. My mother was hysterical, but not in the way you might expect. She wasn't crying about the children. She was crying about Ariana. How could they do this to her? She kept saying. This has to be a mistake. Those parents are probably just looking for money. And then, the sentence that cut something final between us. Why didn't you come to us first? She said it like I had done something wrong, like the betrayal wasn't what Ariana had done, like the real crime was that I had gone outside the family. I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone, and something inside me went very still. Because in that moment, I understood her, completely. My mother loved her daughter more than she loved the truth, more than she loved those children, more than she loved me. She would have buried it. She would have moved Ariana somewhere else, found a therapist, made it disappear quietly. And 8 children would have grown up carrying something unspeakable, with no one ever saying it mattered. I couldn't let that happen. I did what I had to do, I said. My voice sounded calm, detached, like it belonged to someone else. She cried harder, called me selfish, said I had destroyed our family. I didn't argue, because there was nothing left to argue about. My father called the next day. He wasn't crying. He was worse. Cold. Controlled. You've destroyed this family, he said. No greeting. No hesitation. Whatever happens to Ariana is on you. He didn't ask if it was true. Didn't ask about evidence. Didn't ask about the children. He asked if I could take back my statement, clarify it, soften it. He asked me to help protect her. And in that moment, something in me closed completely.
Listen.
No, I said. There was a pause, a long one. Then he hung up. That was the last real conversation I ever had with my father. The fallout came fast, and it came from everywhere. My parents stopped speaking to me. My aunt called to say she was disappointed in how I handled things. My uncle said I should have kept it within the family. My cousin sent me a message that said, "You're dead to us." Even my grandmother, 83 years old, called me crying and asked, "Why couldn't you just leave it alone?" That question stayed with me, because the answer was so simple. Because it wasn't something you leave alone. It was something you stop. The only person who didn't turn on me was my younger cousin, Maya. 19. Too young, maybe, to have learned how to ignore what's right. They were kids, she said. You did the right thing. One person, out of an entire family. Ethan cooperated fully, gave the police everything he had. And then he disappeared, changed his number, moved away. I didn't blame him.
Bitch.
My parents tried to contact him, not to thank him, to pressure him, to take it back. My mother even left him a voicemail, one that would later be used in court. In it, she said he had misunderstood, that Ariana was going through a difficult time, that making this public would ruin an innocent woman's life. An innocent woman, with 8 victims. That's who my mother is. And for a long time, I couldn't reconcile that with the woman who packed my lunches, who showed up to school events, who told me she loved me. Now I can. Because they were never different people. She has always been someone who protects what she values most.
Wow.
It's just that for the first time, the cost of that protection wasn't abstract. It was children. And she chose anyway. So did I. The difference is, I chose differently. And by the time the trial began, there was no going back. The trial began 14 months after Ariana's arrest. By then, the story had calcified into 2 versions. There was the truth, and then there was my family's version of it. In the truth, Ariana had used trust, access, and charm to harm children over an extended period of time. In my family's version, she was a good woman caught in something exaggerated, misunderstood, maybe even engineered by people with bad intentions. They never said that part too directly in public. Not at first. They wrapped it in softer language. Complicated. Tragic. A mental health crisis. A mistake. Anything that made it sound survivable. Anything except what it was. My parents emptied themselves out for her defense. They drained savings, mortgaged the house, borrowed money from my uncle. My father, who had once told me community college was the practical choice because money was tight, somehow found endless resources when Ariana was the one in danger. That detail did not surprise me. It only confirmed what I had always known. There had never been one set of rules in our family. There had been one set for Ariana, and another for the rest of us, mostly me. PM. I attended every day I could. Not because I wanted to see Ariana. I didn't. Not really. But because I needed to sit in that courtroom and refuse the lie. I needed my own body there as a witness to what had happened. To the fact that someone in our family had chosen the children. Even if I was the only one. Courtrooms are strange places. So much pain gets translated into procedure. Someone stands. Someone sits. Someone objects. Someone rephrases. And meanwhile, lives are being split apart beneath fluorescent lights while everyone pretends language is enough to hold it. The prosecution was careful, precise. They did not need theatrics. They had evidence. They had timelines. They had digital records. They had testimony. And every day that passed, it became more impossible to pretend this was some wild misunderstanding. The defense tried anyway. Of course they did. That was their job. But knowing it was their job did not make it easier to sit there and listen to them chip away at children's credibility with polished voices and expensive shoes. They questioned memory, context, interpretation. They suggested confusion where there had been harm. They dressed doubt in legal language and asked the room to call it fairness. My mother cried almost every day. Not quietly. Not the kind of crying you do when grief slips out before you can stop it. This was something more deliberate, visible. A performance of maternal devastation aimed at anyone willing to look. My father sat beside her, jaw tight, hand wrapped around hers, both of them facing forward like grieving parents in a tragedy that had happened to them. Sometimes I would watch them instead of the witness stand. Not for long. Just enough to remind myself that love can rot into something unrecognizable if it is fed enough denial. Ariana rarely looked at them. That struck me. I had expected tears, or panic, or some visible sign that this was reaching her. But she mostly sat still, composed, almost annoyed, like the entire process was beneath her. Like everyone had inconvenienced her by insisting on reality. Once, during a recess, I saw her turn toward our mother. Just slightly, not enough for anyone else to notice. And my mother leaned in fast, desperate, whispering something with wet eyes and shaking hands. Ariana nodded once. That was all. Like a queen acknowledging a loyal subject. The image made me cold. Because even then, even with everything collapsing around her, she still knew exactly how to hold their devotion. I wish I could say the trial made my parents face the truth. It didn't. Truth is not always enough. Not when people have built an identity around refusing it. Every day that evidence mounted, they did not soften. They hardened. You could see it happening. The more undeniable it became, the more fiercely they needed me to be the villain. Because if I wasn't, then they had spent their lives loving the wrong daughter, the wrong way, for the wrong reasons. And some people would rather lose reality than admit that. My extended family kept their distance from me in public. That was almost funny. They had no problem condemning me in texts and phone calls, but in the courthouse, they treated me like something fragile and contagious. A scandal with a face. If they saw me in the hallway, they looked past me, or through me, like I was already a ghost and they were just being polite enough not to mention it. Only Maya still spoke to me. She would sit beside me some mornings with terrible vending machine coffee and say quiet things like, "You don't have to talk." So we often didn't. There are some people who prove they love you by letting silence stay gentle. Maya did that. I have never forgotten it. The verdict came on a Thursday. The jury deliberated for less than a day. That detail mattered more to me than I expected. Not because I wanted drama, but because the speed said what nobody in my family ever would. This was clear. This was real. This was not some impossible, complicated puzzle. It was exactly what it looked like. I was sitting in the third row when the jurors filed back in. My parents were in the front. My mother had tissues already clenched in one hand. My father was staring straight ahead so hard he looked carved from stone. Ariana stood at the defense table beside her attorney, expression flat. The courtroom settled. The foreperson spoke. And just like that, one word at a time, the truth was made official. Guilty, on all counts. My mother collapsed before the clerk had finished reading. My father caught her under the arms, almost by reflex, and pulled her upright while she made a sound I had never heard from another human being. Not grief exactly, something more primal. The sound of a person mourning the death of denial. Ariana didn't move. She didn't cry. Didn't turn to our parents. Didn't lower her head. She looked at me, straight at me. I had imagined that moment so many times, but I had gotten it wrong. I expected anger, maybe hatred, maybe some crack in the mask. What I saw instead was blame. Pure, uncomplicated blame, as if I had done something to her. As if the courtroom, the charges, the verdict, the ruined lives, all of it, had emerged from my betrayal, not from her choices. And suddenly I saw her clearly. Not my sister, not the golden child, not the person my parents built altars for. Just a woman who had spent her entire life being protected from consequences and could not comprehend why, this time, protection had failed. I held her gaze. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I wanted her to understand something in that moment. Not for my sake. Not even for revenge. For the children. I wanted her to see that someone had finally chosen them over her. That someone in the Carter family had broken the pattern. That she had not been untouchable after all. The sentencing came 6 weeks later. By then, the air around the case had changed. The certainty of the verdict had settled over everything, but certainty does not bring peace. It just removes the last place denial can hide. My parents still came to court, still sat in the front row, still acted like attendance itself could change what had already been proven. The judge imposed life, no possibility of parole for 40 years. Ariana would be nearly 70 before the system even considered letting her out. When the sentence was read, my mother lowered her face into both hands. My father leaned toward her and whispered something I couldn't hear. I didn't need to. I knew it would not be about the children. It never was. The victim impact statements were the hardest part. I will not describe them in detail. I won't turn that pain into scenery. But I will say this. There is something permanent about hearing a parent speak from the place where helplessness and fury meet. It enters your body and stays there. It waits in ordinary moments. In grocery store aisles. At red lights. In the quiet right before sleep. And it reminds you that justice is not clean. It does not heal what happened. It only says, at minimum, that what happened mattered enough to name. I sat very still while those statements were read. Not because I was calm. Because I was afraid if I let myself feel everything at once, I would come apart in public. And I refused to give my family one more image they could misunderstand. So I kept my hands folded in my lap, kept breathing, kept reminding myself that the point of all this was never my pain. It was accountability. It was the children. It had always been the children. When court adjourned, my parents stood and walked out without looking at me. Right past my row. My mother leaning on my father. My father's face set in that same cold, furious stillness. Neither of them turned their heads. Not even once. No. That should have hurt less by then. It didn't. There is no amount of certainty that makes rejection painless. Even when you understand it. Even when you expect it. A part of you still notices. Still flinches. Still remembers being someone's daughter. I stayed in the courtroom after everyone left. Just me. The benches. The humming lights. The silence after a life sentence is read. And I sat there thinking two things that seemed impossible to hold at the same time. I have lost my entire family, and it was worth it. Both were true. Both are still true. People love the idea of courage when it is tidy, when it fits in headlines and courtroom sketches and short conversations with phrases like, "You were so brave." What they don't talk about is the after, the wreckage, the long, unglamorous loneliness of doing the right thing in a family that has decided the right thing was silence. Justice had been served, but victory did not taste like victory. It tasted like ash. Because the people who were supposed to love me without conditions had made their choice, and they had not chosen me. The first 6 months after sentencing were the worst. Not because Ariana was gone. She was exactly where she belonged. The worst part was the absence. The phone that stopped ringing. The holidays that continued without me. The family dinners I could see in photos posted online like nothing had happened except my disappearance. Thanksgiving. Christmas. My mother's birthday. All of them moving forward as if the empty place at the table was mine by design. Not Ariana's. Mine. Because in their version of the story, she was still worth grieving. And I was the one who had broken the family beyond repair. 3 months after sentencing, my father sent me a letter. Handwritten. 2 pages. I only read it once. Once was enough. He wrote that I had destroyed the family name. That Ariana needed help, not prison. That I had chosen strangers over blood. And at the very bottom, in shakier handwriting than the rest, as if even his anger had trembled by then, he wrote, You are not my daughter anymore. I put the letter in a drawer and never opened it again. But I didn't need to. Some sentences do not stay on paper. They move in. They live under your skin. People think the hardest part is the moment you speak up. It isn't. The hardest part is everything that comes after. When the world goes quiet and you realize silence can be louder than anything you've ever heard. The first thing I lost wasn't my parents. It was normal. The casual kind. The kind where your phone lights up and you don't hesitate before answering. The kind where holidays are dates on a calendar instead of decisions you have to survive. The kind where your last name feels like something you belong to. After the sentencing, everything became deliberate. Every interaction, every introduction, every silence. At first, people at work were supportive. I was still in the same town where Ariana had coached, the same town where the trial had been covered in local news. They knew who I was, not in detail, but enough. There were cards on my desk, small notes. We're proud of you. You did the right thing. For a while, that was enough to carry me through the days, proof that the world outside my family still made sense. But support has an expiration date. It faded slowly, not all at once. That would have been easier. Conversations got shorter. Eye contact got thinner. The break room would go quiet half a second too late when I walked in. And then one afternoon, my supervisor asked me to come into his office. He looked uncomfortable, the kind of uncomfortable that tries to disguise itself as professionalism. Olivia, he said, this isn't personal. People always say that before something becomes exactly that. He told me some employees were concerned about the attention, about being associated with the case. He said the company valued me. He also said, maybe a fresh start somewhere else would be better. For everyone. For everyone. I remember sitting there, hands folded in my lap, thinking about how carefully people construct sentences when they want to avoid saying something ugly out loud. I wasn't being fired. I was being removed. Gently, politely, like something inconvenient. I resigned 3 weeks later. I didn't fight it. I didn't have the energy. By then, I had already learned something important. Even when you do the right thing, people will still move away from you if your story makes them uncomfortable. So I left. A new city, a small apartment, a job where my name didn't mean anything yet. That was the goal, to be no one, to exist without context. And for a while it worked. On the surface, my life looks normal. I wake up. I go to work. I come home. I cook dinner. I watch something forgettable on TV. I go to bed. It's quiet, functional, safe. But there are things people don't see. They don't see me sitting in my car for 10 minutes before going into a grocery store because crowds make my chest tighten now. They don't see me checking the locks 3 times before I go to sleep. They don't see the night I had to leave a movie theater halfway through because there was a scene with a children's sports team and my body just shut down. Trauma doesn't announce itself. It settles. It waits. And then it reminds you, in small, precise ways, that you are not who you used to be. I tried therapy. I still go. It helps, in the way physical therapy helps after an injury. It doesn't erase what happened. It teaches you how to live with it. My therapist told me something once that I think about almost every day. She said, "You didn't just report your sister. You grieved her. You grieved the person you thought she was. And you grieved the family you thought you had." She was right. I am in mourning for something that never really existed. A family where truth mattered more than image. A family where children, any children, would have been protected without hesitation. A family where love wasn't conditional on silence. That family was a story I told myself. And losing it felt like losing something real. My mother started calling again about 4 months after the sentencing. The first time I answered. I don't know why. Hope, maybe. Or habit. A part of me thought, maybe she's ready. Maybe something has shifted. It hadn't. She didn't apologize. Didn't ask how I was. Didn't say she understood. She told me Ariana was struggling in prison. That other inmates had targeted her. That she wasn't eating. And then she asked me to help. To write to the judge. To advocate for a transfer to a lower security facility. She was asking me, the person who had reported her daughter for hurting children, to make that daughter more comfortable. I listened for 4 minutes. I remember counting them without meaning to, like my brain needed structure to survive the conversation. And then I asked her something. Mom, do you know the name of any of the children she hurt? Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said quietly, "That's not fair." I closed my eyes.
So,
Neither is what happened to them. She hung up. She has called 11 times since. I haven't answered. Not once. I stay in touch with some of the families. Not all. I understand why some want nothing to do with me. My last name is still the same as the person who hurt their children. For some, that's enough. But a few reached out. One mother, Denise, sent me a handwritten letter. I keep it in my nightstand. It says, "You gave my son the one thing I couldn't. You gave him proof that someone believed him." On the hardest days, I read that because there are still days when my mother's voice echoes in my head. "Why didn't you come to us first?" There are still nights when I hear my father's words like they were just written. "You are not my daughter anymore." There are still moments when I remember Ariana's eyes in that courtroom. Not remorse, not regret, blame. And on those days, it's easy to wonder if the version of me my family believes is real. The traitor, the bitter sister, the one who destroyed everything. But then I read that letter, and I remember why I walked into that police station.
Gab.
Not for me, not against Ariana. For the children who couldn't walk in there themselves.
Seat.
I am 29 years old. I live alone in a city where no one knows my history unless I choose to tell them. I have a job, a routine, a life that from the outside looks steady. And most days, it is enough. But some nights, it isn't.
Damn it.
Some nights I lie awake and feel the absence of everything I lost. Every holiday, every birthday, every version of love that disappeared the moment I told the truth. And I grieve. Not for Ariana. For the family I thought I had. For the parents I believed in. For the version of my life where I didn't have to choose between my blood and someone else's safety. That version never existed. I just didn't know it yet. My mother still calls. Her name lights up on my phone, and for half a second, I consider answering. Half a second. Then I think about a child sitting in a room, trying to explain something no child should ever have to explain. And I put the phone down. Every time. People ask me if I regret it. Carefully, gently, like they're afraid of the answer. So let me be clear. I have no regrets. Not one.
Hey.
I would do it again. Faster, louder, without hesitation.
Hey.
I would walk into that police station 1,000 times. I would give the same statement. I would sit in that same courtroom. I would hold my sister's gaze as the verdict was read. I would watch my parents walk past me without turning their heads. And I would go home alone. Because 8 children deserve someone who would choose them. I was that someone. And if the cost of that choice is a lifetime of unanswered calls, then that is the cost. I will carry it. The difference is, I chose my weight. They never got to choose theirs. And that is why I will never put it down. Not for anyone. Not even for family.